Welcome. My name is Jacob Junkin, and this is another episode of Make the Cut, the podcast show in which I take a look at film adaptations to see how the original work has been adapted into the big screen. In this episode, I'm going to be exploring Ibn Fadlan's journey onto the silver screen with the 13th Warrior and what amount of historical evidence managed to survive the final cut of the film. It's interesting to me because this film is already based on a book, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is already a loose adaptation of Ibn Fadlan's journey. Going from just the books, there's usually a ton of dramatic liberties taken for the film's adaptation, so you can only imagine how two filters might change the historical context, taken from actual historical means. This can be spoken doubly in how movies in general are rapidly adapted from various other mediums such as comic books, which is the craze as of late. The general consensus is that the adaptation needs to be at least semi-relevant from the context of the original. So as far as this piece goes, this whole movie is entirely based on a real 10th century Arab traveler named Ibn Fadlan. He left behind a very old travel log in his journey to meet with some early Rus people, the Volga Bulgars. Basically, he's sent on the behalf of the Abbasid Caliphate to relay a message on why the money was missing. The movie is very similar when you look at the basis of the plot compared to what we know about him. Ibn is on the very same journey, though the idea of the money isn't quite there. The film has him sent as an ambassador, more so as a punishment more than anything else. That being said, it does at the very least establish that there's a connection between the Abbasid Caliphate and the Volga Bulgars, which is very true. In a very interesting and rare English article on a very Russian website, the author goes into a ton of detail about how the relations of that area have been thoroughly explored between the two parties. There's just a load of evidence of their relationship and how it really affected that area's history in particular afterward. Lots of trading and exchanges of cultural practices. You know that it's because of that early connection that a lot of the area has remained Islamic onto the modern age. It's crazy how things like that can really stick into an area. Speaking of exchanging cultural practices, the beginning of the film also did a good job in displaying how Ibn was very unfamiliar with the Volga Bulgars' way of life. Both the film and the original writing showed how the Rus people would share a bowl to clean themselves and really captured Ibn's disgust at the practice. It would be completely different from what he's used to back in would be, the peak of modern civilization back in Baghdad. All things considered, that's not too bad in my own opinion. I've definitely heard things being much worse at other times when it comes to hygiene. For example, I've seen on the World History website describe some hygiene practices in the medieval times. How there were monks in Europe that would typically not wash but just 2 times a year. Considering the Volga Bulgars would at least do communal baths as well, I'd say Ibn got a fair deal at the end. On that note, that's where a lot of similarities end, and the sequence of events for Ibn takes a very hard and liberal turn for dramatics. The plot of the movie itself becomes a hybrid experience of Beowulf. I have to say that isn't what happens to the Arabian Man at all. Sure, there will always be an argument towards whether an historical story needs to be completely accurate or not when you're adapting for something meant for entertainment. Truthfully, there isn't any actual evidence of what happened to Ibn after his connection with the Volga Bulgars, besides you could at least infer he survived to pass his travelogue on afterwards. Any interesting uniqueness that the movie might be able to present is really mutated into becoming a generic piece of a man becoming a warrior with fantasy elements and doesn't really try to emulate any historical means of what that culture might have been like in actuality and how that exchange might have gone on afterwards in any sense of a proper interpretation.
And these travels actually feature in various films and popular dramas, don't they?
Yes, they do. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword, really, because it really improves recognition of Ibn Fadlan in particular and of these connections between the Islamic world and the Rus. But, I often, when I tell people what I'm working on, have people quoting from films in response.
In the end, I believe that there's a story to be told that even yields accurate dramatics without the need to cut and bastardize the original text. If anything, there is at least merit in spreading the historical audience to a more mainstream audience. Ibn Fadlan is certainly worth knowing due to its contribution towards lifestyles of Vikings we could never have known otherwise. The film, if anything, displays to everyone that we all have an historical connection that has defined our heritage. That even a Middle Eastern man might affect the lives of so many after his interaction is a moment to be wondered at. Thank you for listening to Make the Cut. It was a pleasure to look at this film and share the experience with you all. Make sure to subscribe for future episodes. Next time we'll be looking at the story of Pocahontas. See you all next time.